Hello, viewers. So I recently got a message from chess.com saying that one of my opponents was a computer cheater. So let's go ahead and take a look at that game and see if we can learn something. So in the game, we each had only 10 minutes of thinking time total for all of our moves. So the quality is definitely going to be a lot lower than what we're used to see on this channel. But nevertheless, I think there are some insights here. So I was playing white. I played my pawn to e4 as I always do. That could have been the first sign that something was wrong, but I didn't pay attention to it during the game. I was totally oblivious that I was playing against a computer and not a human. So humans have their first 10 or so moves memorized, so we often play these moves very rapidly and save our thinking time for later. My opponent, though, took almost 9 seconds to play pawn to c5. Now, if you're cheating, you gotta go open up your engine window and plug in your opponent's move, and then copy your opponent's reply, the computer's reply, into the game, so that slows them down a little bit. So that could have been a sign to be suspicious, but I didn't know. I was not aware of it. I just thought, this person likes to think, or like to take their time and not be sloppy. But I just was totally oblivious, did not know I was playing a computer. I played knight f3 pretty much instantly, as I usually do. And they think for some more time. They play knight c6. d4 grabs some space in the center. I'm preparing to bring out some pieces. We trade pawns. And then she brings out her knight and attacks my pawn. And I played knight c3, defend and bring out my knight. Pawn to d6. Very standard. This is known as the classical variation of the Sicilian. So I started playing bishop g5 not too long. I'm still kind of new to this system here. I used to play bishop c4 and then castle kingside, but objectively, that's just not very dangerous. So the idea behind the bishop g5 system, called the Richter-Rauser, is that at some time, at the right moment, I'm going to play bishop takes f6. Not right now. If I do it right now, she just plays queen takes and Eva over here is going to be just fine. So if I time it right, though, I can force her to take with the pawn. So bishop takes, then pawn takes. And the problem that black is going to face is that there's no good place for her king. If she castles queenside, well, this file is open. If their bishop takes, pawn takes, castles kingside, then this file is going to be open, so that's not safe either. We know from earlier videos in this series that players want to fight for control of the center, so there's going to be a lot of action in the center. That means the center is not safe either. So we want to time my capture right to force her to play g-pawn takes, and that's going to make her king unsafe no matter where she tries to go with it. So I play queen d2, which is the standard move here, preparing to castle queenside, bring my own king to safety. Let's bring the rook out over here and put some pressure on this pawn. a6, a standard idea in the Sicilian we know from earlier videos. And I castle along, following the usual plan. And then bishop e7. This move was new to me, so I had to stop and think here. I ended up playing pawn to f4, which is pretty typical. So one idea is that if black's not careful, there could be pawn to e5 on the horizon, and that would just dislodge his knight and open this d file for my queen and rook. So black traded knights and then played b5, a pretty typical idea in this system. So because my king is on the queen side, black is going to start trying to attack over there. So play the pawn up and then at the right moment, not right now, but at the right moment, play b4, kick my knight away, bring out the queen and the rook, and start causing some trouble over there. So now I felt this is the moment to take the knight. Because if black takes with the bishop, then I just snap this pawn over here and up a pawn for nothing. So the bishop has to stay back home to guard the pawn, so just to play g-pawn takes, and we've already succeeded in the first ambition of forcing her to take the pawn, and that's going to be unsafe no matter where he tries to hide. So because the position was new to me, like I was saying earlier, I didn't know what the usual idea was here. apparently most people play e5 here. Check my database, and that's the most popular move. But I didn't know that. I just played king b1. This is a very typical idea to just bring the king to some extra safety and wait for developments. Wait for black to commit herself before doing something. So now it's a very interesting moment. Black played queen to d7, which is definitely not a very human move. The more standard ideas are playing the queen out to c7, or the queen out to a5, or bishop b7 looks pretty natural to me. So in retrospect, I might have thought, oh, it's supposed to be a computer move because computers don't always follow the usual human plans. But then I checked with my computer, and the funniest thing is, my computer doesn't like queen d7 either. So what's going on? I'm thinking her computer is saying queen c7, and then she mouse slipped. That's my theory. So after some thought, I play pawn to f5, a very standard idea in this position. So there are a couple ideas going on here. First of all, I'd like to induce pawn to e5. So if I can get that to happen, then this square over here is going to be very weak. My knight can jump in. So black's probably not going to cooperate with that. They're not going to make it that easy for me. But if black doesn't cooperate, then I can do things like play pawn up. Let's see how my arrows work. Pawn up here, then I bishop out, and then maybe even sometimes I might go here. Whoops, not there. Here and then here. Just put a lot of pressure on that pawn to force e5 to happen. After trading over here, I also bring a rook to the f file and cause some trouble down there. So this is all a very typical idea in this system. So now black played rook g8, which is another typical idea. So what she's trying to do is turn that pawn takes f6 from a negative into a positive. So the bad thing about playing the pawn captures that she did earlier is that now her king's going to be unsafe no matter where he tries to hide. The good part, though, is that now black's rook can enjoy this open file. So trying to make the best of it. So here I played pawn to g3, continue the standard idea of bishop h3 and then hitting this pawn over here. So my computer actually said that it's better to play pawn takes first, and then I can actually play knight d5, which I did not see at all. Again, I only had 10 minutes of thinking time total for all my moves, so the quality is a little bit lower than you'd expect. If I had more time, I might have seen this possibly. So the big idea is that if black takes it, then I play queen takes, I'm hitting both her rooks. So black can try to save the day by playing queen g4. That protects this rook, and now I can't grab this guy because then this guy would fall with checkmate. So the computer's analysis continues. I can play h3 here, trying to dislodge the queen. But that queen, though, is doing a very critical job protecting this rook and also attacking my rook, so the queen has nowhere to run. Black's best bet is bishop b7, trying to counterattack my queen. So then I take, she takes, and then I take. Rook takes and rook takes, and when the smoke clears, I have an extra pawn over here. And also this bishop is under some pressure. I could easily play, you can imagine like rook e1 and then play more pressure on it. And black is in pretty bad shape here, maybe even lost. So that little mouse slip with queen d7 might have costed the game if I had been more precise. But anyways, I played g3. So now she plays king f8. The king has no safe place to go to, but maybe the computer felt this was safer than staying back home on e8. So now I figure it's a good time to exchange pawns and then bring the bishop out to put some pressure down there and also bring a rook to the f file and do some damage on the f file where the king is now located. So now she plays queen c6, which is a good idea. So I was threatening to play knight d5 here, and the knight would be immune because if she takes it, then my bishop would just grab her queen. So she steps out of the pin, so now I can't play knight d5 anymore. So here I played queen e3 because she was threatening to play e5. e5 hit my queen over here, but also threatened my bishop over there, so I figured that'd be a double attack and that would cost me a bishop in the game if I let that happen. So if you're just playing a blitz game, you don't have a lot of time to think, then queen e3 does seem pretty reasonable. The computer, though, said that actually I could ignore her threat. The computer said I could actually play rook f1. And as she tries the idea of hitting both my queen and the bishop, then I save the queen. And if she takes the bishop, then I just play queen check. And king's got to move. And next move I just grab the bishop. And I'm fine. I'm more than fine, actually. I'm doing fantastically here because my knight's going to be a monster on d5. And this bishop on e7 is going to be just a very sad piece with nowhere to go. So queen is one of those little inaccuracies that happen during blitz games when you don't have a lot of time to think and see some of those nuances. So here she played rook g6, and actually my computer does not approve of this move. That seems kind of strange because you think a computer cheater would be playing very high quality moves, but I guess your computer is not very good. So it turns out that you could have played b4 here and gotten in a position that's very similar to what would have happened in the game. So we got this situation in the game, but this would have been without an unnecessary rook g6 thrown in. So I played knight e2, which is a very typical idea. Again, like I'm trying to put a lot of pressure on this pawn over here. So I'm thinking about things like knight d4, which hits the pawn, also hits the queen, and also knight f4, which hit, knight f4, not f5, which hit the rook as well as the pawn. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on that pawn. So I successfully provoke e5, which weakens the d5 square. So my knight's going to come back there and just be a monster. But first, though, I got to deal with this threat to my bishop, so I trade bishops. I'm actually pretty happy about trading bishops there because that bishop on c8 could have potentially guarded d5. So I'm eliminating all defenders of that square. So even though I'm a humble 2100 player facing a computer, I'm actually doing pretty well right now. Here I played rook d2, which is inaccurate. It's still good for white, but this is not the best move. I thought about playing knight c3, which would be very consistent, going for the d5 square. What I was worried about, though, was pawn to b4, kicking the knight, but then my pawn on c2 falls with check. So I saw that, and I guess I have to play king a1 here. I thought this actually could still be good for me, even though I'm dropping a pawn with check, because this knight over here is just so powerful and dominant that could be more than enough compensation. It turns out that instinct was correct, but I thought if I play rook d2, I can probably do the same thing and move later and not lose a pawn, but that turned out to be inaccurate. So let's continue the analysis a little bit further. The computer recommends black's best bet here might have been rook c4, putting some pressure on my e4 pawn, but I could ignore that and go on the attack with queen to a7, hitting the bishop. If black tries to defend it with rook g7, then I come in with rook f1, and now I'm hitting this pawn as well. And it's really hard at this point to hold everything together for black. Black's position is about to just fall apart. So I missed an opportunity. Maybe if I had more time, I would have seen this, but it's a blitz game. Some sloppiness is to be expected. So now black plays b4, and now I can't play knight c3, so my junior going to d5 is being foiled. So now I made an oversight. I just played rook f1, which is a pretty logical move, trying to start some trouble on the f file where black's king is, but I just totally overlooked rook g4, and now my pawn over here can't be defended. So what I should have done instead back here, instead of playing rook f1, I should have played h3. So now it's not rook g4, and I'll play rook f1 next move, and I'm still better. But I didn't see that. I played rook f1, missing rook g4. My pawn's going to fall, so I tossed in a check, and king moves. Still not really safe, but at least protects the pawn over here, avoids immediate catastrophe. Now here's where things really went wrong for me. So it turns out the computer says I could have held on by playing queen to h3. So the idea is that, well, a couple ideas here. So it looks like my pawn's going to fall, but I have some resources here. If black takes the pawn with the queen, then I have this amazing move, rook to f4. If black takes it, then I gobble up this rook, and then I grab the rook on c8, and game over, I'm winning. Black can try tossing a check with queen h1, but then has to play knight to c1, and there's still no way out for black. If she takes the rook, either way, this guy's going to fall. So black can't go down this road. So black can't take the pawn with the queen. She could have tried taking it with the rook instead, but then I have queen e6 check, which also hits the bishop. So black has to come back to f8 to save the bishop. And I'm a pawn down, but I can start an attack here and get some very real compensation. So the king again is just not safe no matter where he tries to go. So black could try to trade off the queens to try to take some of the energy out of my attack, but of course I'm not going to cooperate with that. The queen's a powerful attacker, so if you're attacking, don't trade queens. So then I could come back, and now I'm threatening to play g5 and black's defenses would collapse. So black gets out of the way. And then knight g3 hits the rook, and I'm still a pawn down, but I have some very dangerous ideas here, like I still have g5 on the agenda and knight h5 hitting this pawn, so here I'm still very much in the game. But I didn't see that. I was low on time. I just played knight g1, which is, this puts me on the road to defeat. So what I was trying to do here, to explain my bad decision, my knight e2 doesn't have anywhere nice to go. Before I was looking at squares like knight f4 and knight d4, but this pawn e5 just stops all of that. So I was trying to reroute the knight to f3, and then maybe on a good day we'll go to h4 and f5 if all goes well. But of course, she's not going to let me do that. Or rather, I should say, her computer is not going to let me do that. So black played pawn to a5. I think most humans in a blitz game would just gobble up this pawn e4 instead, but the computer sees that that pawn e4 is not running away, so there's no hurry. We'll take it on our own time when it feels right. So I played knight f3, again hoping to get to f5 eventually. And now she grabs the pawn. And now we keep trying to make our dreams come true with knight f5, but she foils that plan. Rook g5 just reinforces the control of the f5 square. So I came back, trying to dislodge the rook. The computer tells me this is a mistake, and is it better off playing knight g2 and then rook e1, trying to get some semblance of coordination. But I was running really low on time at this point, and it's hard to make good decisions when you don't have much time on the clock. The computer played rook g6, so I came back to h3, eyeballing the rook down there, but of course the computer's not going to hang a rook, so she played f5, blocking my queen's attack and also starting to mobilize those pawns. And now a bishop can someday come to life by coming out to g5. So here I played knight e1. What was I thinking? Oh, I was trying to put some more pressure on the f5 pawn, so my rook is now hitting it. So she hits my other rook, so I bring it to safety and also pile up some more pressure, but her next move just completely diffuses all that. Queen g4 blocks my queen, so I trade, and now there is no pawn to attack over here, so my rooks are doubled up, but they're not going anywhere. So now I played knight d3, trying to again find a good square for my knight. And at last, my knight finds freedom, and we get to the d5 square we've been dreaming of for the whole game. But by now, black has mobilized and is in more than good enough shape to handle all this. So she played a very nice move, rook f3. I don't want to take it because if I take it, she'll get a very powerful passed pawn on f3 that's going to be protected, and these guys can just roll down the board and promote. On the other hand, it's hard to not take it because what else can I do? I can't move this rook because then I'll drop my rook down here. Can't move this guy without hanging this guy. My knight is very beautiful on d5, but all the squares are covered. So that square's covered, that one's 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 covered. I guess I am playing impotent attack for knight b6, but that's not doing anything. I can't remove my king. King c1 runs this bishop. So I hated playing rook takes f3, but I felt there was really very little choice. h4, trying to dislodge that bishop, but here she played a very nice move, just playing pawn d3, ignoring it, take, and then e2, and I think I ran out of time here, and that's how I lost, but I'm just totally busted. If I move the rook, say rook e1, then f2, rook takes, pawn promotes, it's over. So that's how a computer cheater clobbered me. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you're inspired to play better chess, and I hope you guys do not run into any computer cheaters when you do. Take care.